when we think about final girls, in my opinion, and then I'll see what you two think. The final girl has become such a legendary aspect of horror.
Is anybody home?
Hello? What do you want?
Are you the sheriff?
Let's get down to brass tacks.
When you think about all of these years, I mean, these decades of films that have been so important in the horror genre and very important to horror fans and the horror community. I mean, the actresses specifically that are considered as final girls, I mean, they are quite literally royalty. And I think a very important aspect of a really amazing film, especially if you're talking about slashers, but even outside of slashers, I think that it's one of those aspects. I know for myself as a young horror fan, connecting with that character, and in a lot of instances, them being put in a scenario where it seems like all is lost. When I first watched Friday the 13th, which got me on my horror journey, and I'm thinking about Alice, played by Adrienne King. I'm thinking to myself, my God, can she survive this situation? She's up against it. This mother is wreaking havoc in New Jersey on any and everything in her path, and she cannot be stopped. Shout out to Pamela Voorhees. So, my connection with that character, with Alice, specifically, was strong. And at the end, when all seemed to be over and dealing with that stinger, I was right there too. I was in that boat with friggin' Jason coming out to grab me. You know what I'm saying? So, as a really young horror fan at like 7 years of age, I connected with this character and with this specific idea of a final girl. Rachel, I'll start with you. When you think of the final girl, what do you think about, and how important is it to you for horror?
I love a final girl. Slasher, I've talked about this, slashers are my favorite subgenre, and I think that final girls in general are one of the reasons that horror is so loved by women. If you poll horror audiences, you will find out that, they are at least half filled with women. Women flock to horror, and I think it's because it's one of the few genres where we get to be front and center. We get to be that final girl, and we get to be the hero of the story, and you get so much development and focus on these female characters, and I think that's just like a really fun aspect, and I really do think that that's one of the reasons that women do flock to horror. And like you said, you get these girls who are so relatable, even to male audiences. They're teenagers, they're going through things that a lot of us can experience. We've talked about how slashers are usually young adult and teenage based and viewed, geared towards that audience. And I think that teenagers and teenage girls, they are the prime audiences for these girls, like you said, to watch them go through this hell and just think like, oh my goodness, are they going to make it? Like you think of like Laurie Strode in those last 20 minutes of Halloween, and like, is she going to make it out? And you are so on her side. And I remember Jamie Lee Curtis talking about how she didn't quite understand the appeal of the final girl and of the girl next door and the vulnerability until she watched the movie in the theater. And as she's approaching the Myers house, the audiences are screaming, don't go in there. And she's like, wow, well, they care about this girl, they care about what happens to her, and they don't want to see her get cut down. So I think that's great. And I think, as we've gone along and horror has evolved and changed, even final girls have evolved and changed. We've got the ones now like Sam Carpenter, who is like a little bit of a villain, as well as a bit of a final girl, and they're starting to branch out a little bit, and they're not quite as girl next door type. We're starting to see final girls that are a little bit more complex and a little bit messier than they used to be. I keep thinking of like Dina Johnson from like the Fear Street trilogy. She was very brash and very aggressive and very not like your average final girl. So I really like that we are starting to, really explore the trope. But I mean, the final girl has always been a great character. If you look all the way as early as like Jess in Black Christmas.
Agnes, it's me, Billy.
archetypes. I always use Jess in Black Christmas as a great example of like a really complex character who also fit the final girl archetype. So yeah, I love a final girl. I love what final girls do for horror, and I do think that they are a huge component in why women flock to horror so much, because we really get to see ourselves front and center and kicking some ass, which is always awesome.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely agree with that. Well said. Well said. Kill, how about you, man? You know, when you think about the idea of the final girl, you know, what are your thoughts on it and your connection?
Well, you know, it's yin and yang. You need both parts to make a good movie. You need a good antagonist and a great protagonist. And I agree with something Rachel said. I love to see the evolution of these strong women. I love to see the ones that are a little messy now, a little kind of, do I like this person? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like her, but I guess I don't want her to die, you know. But that's evolution, you know, because you know, we know a lot of the female roles used to just be the damsel in distress, and that's boring, and that's lame, and we've evolved, and I'm glad for that. And you need someone who can be vulnerable, yet can grow into being an ass kicker. You know, Laurie Strode. You see the evolution even in that 2 hours of that one film. You know, they have to be witty, can think on their feet, can improv. You know, and everything I'm saying, I'm sure everyone who's listening can think of. Oh, he's talking about like Jenny, or he's talking about Laurie, or Nancy, or this or that, or Sarah Connor. You know, it's so many. You know, and it crosses the genres. It's not just only horror or slashers. It's sci-fi horror. It's sci-fi. It's, you know, And growing up, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree, you know, a kid of the 80s, you know, you had your big macho guys, but then one of my favorite heroes of all time, or heroines, is Ellen Ripley. She's a badass who literally, if you think about it, gave her entire life to killing aliens.
She was dedicated, bro.
Rambo did it for a small portion. You know, she gave her entire life, and then a clone did some more. All right.
Yeah, she kept it going.
Yep.
So, you know, I love to see a strong woman and a smart character, and that you know, final girls are what makes it fun. You know, it really does.
True. It's so true, man. And there is so much love for them as well. You know, if you've ever had an opportunity to either to be at a convention, or if you've heard about one, or seen, you know, stories or what have you, or video, you can really see the love, you know, from everyone. And I've found in the couple of occasions when I've been so lucky to go, even the little kids, right? You know, when we got a chance to see Heather Langenkamp and Lisa Wilcox when they had the Elm Street reunion, there were little kids, you know, little boys and little girls that were like, oh my God, you know, you're awesome, and this and that. And it's funny, you know, now as a grown adult, seeing those kids getting that experience, and it made me think about, you know, when I was a kid, when we were going to Blockbuster and renting these movies or watching it on TV on a Saturday afternoon and so forth. And it's so cool to see, because I'm thinking to myself, that could be a horror fan for the rest of their lives. And it's really cool, not only to see them appreciate these performers, you know, and specific these actresses, but also to see that they have that love for the old school as well. You know, I mean, it was just so cool to see, man. You know, even those final girls that came along in the late 80s or the 90s or whatever, you know, whether you're talking about Danielle Harris, you know, her line was huge, man. And you saw, you know, these little kids that were asking for an autograph, and the smile on their faces and the smile on her face. And so I think that that's a very important aspect of the legacy of horror. And hopefully, as we continue to see the evolution of the genre, like you guys said, we see the evolution of the final girl, and of course obviously other things involved well, but speaking specifically about final girls, it's awesome to see that growth.
What was the word?
Fuck.
Michael,